Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. This is an interview of Kirt from BHS. I didn't know what that meant. He'd sent me a nice email with questions and comments, very thoughtful, and I thought, this sounds like an interesting guy. I don't invite everybody on the podcast, but when I get something that seems like it'd be interesting to have an exchange that'd be helpful for me as well as for listeners to gain some new insights. So thanks, Kirt, for coming on, and thanks sponsors, Topps, Panini and Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So Kirt from BHS turned into being Kirt from the BHS stood for Brutally Honest Sales, which is how he does business on eBay. And now I understand. So we had a good laugh about that. But he does try to be brutally honest. And so you'll just have to listen in and see where our exchange went. Kirt, thanks for sharing your insights. And thanks, everybody. And here it is.
BHS is just my little side eBay gig, Brutally Honest Sales.
Brutally honest.
And I'll be brutally honest with you.
Where's the brutally honest come from?
That comes from my MO when it comes to buying and selling, just in general, in principle. I feel like a buyer should be fully informed as to what he's getting. I think the issue of trust when it comes to this hobby is really crucial. As a buyer, if it's raw, I always ask something about conditions just to get a feel for the seller. If he comes back with me with almost like an insult type of attitude, hey, if you want to know condition, then you just buy graded, and I don't even deal with that person. As a seller, whether it's a computer, a laptop, because I'm an IT guy, or a baseball card, I will sell myself out of the sale because I will give all the details that they could possibly want to talk themselves out of that buy. I want them to be happy. That's just how I think the transactions should go.
Brutally honest. Do you think people interpret that as extra honest?
I think they probably do. It's a catchy thing. Basically, the MO there is that I've done a lot of buying and basically investing. I have that collector's passion too, but for the most part, this is a way to diversify a portfolio for my wife and I long term, instead of just being in the stock market. Basically, if they have a good transaction with me and they realize that I'm an honest seller, I want there to be something memorable there. I'm going to tell them everything about that card, even if it's slab. If it's got a lousy slab, they're going to know about it in the details of that. If it's overly honest, like you mentioned, that's okay.
I said extra. It shouldn't be. Your yes should be yes and your no should be no. But in our culture now, it's like unnecessarily honest. I think people think, what's the minimum I can say when I'm describing stuff on eBay? I don't know that I over-describe it, but I'm trying to have happy customers. And I think they get in a situation where they'll ask me questions that would be easily answered by reading the description or checking out the photos, the pictures, the scans. And so they're just looking at the title and wondering, like in your case, can I get a good grade out of this when it's raw? In fact, part of our discussion today is about telling the truth, which is not the same as not lying.
True. No, yeah, I understand. But where I'm coming from is, as a buyer who's bought a lot of raw cards in the last couple of years, the pictures only tell so much of the story. If I was to give a number on it, I would say a picture tells maybe 50% of the story on a card. If you're truly interested in condition, the pictures would have to go to a large extent with angled lighting, you know what I'm saying, to find scratches and print lines. For a seller to act as if a buyer has complete or comprehensive information from one picture of the front of a card, I think is a little bit egregious of an assumption. There's a happy medium there, and I see what you're saying too, but I like a lot of information.
And then there's the sliding scale of the value of the item. And
right.
It shouldn't be a sliding scale of the degree of honesty, but it should be a sliding scale perhaps in the degree of detail.
Sure, absolutely. And the honesty part mainly comes with the relationship. Like you and Rich talk about building relationships at card shows and things like that. And if you're exclusively an online guy shopping on eBay, I have a list of sellers I feel have represented their cards. I have a list of sellers that have not. And so I have a top tier, guys that I will try to go back to based on using eBay's advanced search tools. If I'm looking for a particular player in a particular year, I'll filter the sellers that I've saved. And that kind of helps me have a little bit of trust there and confidence in that purchase.
We're getting very philosophical. By the way, I always like to talk about stuff that other people aren't necessarily talking about, especially when I saw the way you came at things. I thought, I'm hearing a lot about transparency. To be transparent is a virtue, but there's such a thing as a filtered transparency. I'm showing you everything, but it's filtered. It's like looking through a glass dimly. Like you said, the scan or the picture, hey, I'm being transparent. Here it is. But if it's not shown at the right reflective light, you can't see things, but you're giving the appearance and the perception of being transparent. But I don't know that you or I or anybody else can be the policeman of brutal honesty or full transparency.
No. And to your point, I'm not interested in dictating to anyone else what they need to do. I have no problem with those sellers that are not interested in giving any information. They have every right to do that. Just post a picture of the front and that's it. I just want people to know that I'm different than that. When I seek sellers that are different than that, it's just a personal thing. I don't have any problem with somebody being partially transparent, but I would rather them not have a problem with me for wanting to be fully transparent. And if they do, that's fine. I just don't deal with it.
Let's call it a statement instead of a verse, but it's judge not lest you be judged. And some people think that means, just applying it to you and me, that we shouldn't judge other people in the way they do their cards because we don't want to be judged. When in reality, I'm already going to be judged. It sounds like you're already assuming you're going to be judged. You're trying to be above reproach. So the not judging means, I think, more about motives than it is about, you can judge somebody's action. Hey, I just saw you murder somebody. You're under arrest. You need to go to jail. You may be the suspect, but I saw you do it. So you're guilty in my eyes, unless there's some extenuating circumstances. So the judging of the behavior is different than judging the motivation. But are you putting that all together when you're trying to evaluate these other eBay sellers? Because you really can't know their motives. But when you see consistent behavior, is that what you're saying? That you're thinking, no matter how good the deal looks, I think that's not somebody I want to buy from, because, is that what you're saying?
Correct. And that's simply based on data. It would be anecdotal data to anyone else. But for me, it's a lot of data on personal experience. You can get a read after you bought hundreds of raw cards. If you have any red flags off the bat, it's best not to buy from that person. When there's confidence in the picture and in the way they represented their sale, then you can dig a little bit deeper. If it's an expensive card, when I say expensive on raw, I think $50 is a fairly expensive raw card. And I think that's worth a question. If it's a chrome card, if it's a refractor, whatever, you want to know how bad the surface is. And you simply can't see that. You can't see it on ComC. I love ComC. I'm not saying anything bad about ComC, but you're not going to know for sure if there are surface scratches or roller lines on a ComC picture. Same thing with eBay. Just looking for information and looking for those who are willing to give it. And on the point of motive, not from a moral standpoint, but it is nice to hear somebody say, I don't grade cards. You know what I'm saying? That way they don't have a pile in their house, in their inventory this is my cast-offs. I would have graded these, but I found flaws. And so they're set aside. I'm going to sell them on eBay and not be very transparent about what it is. Just boom, there it is, and hope I get a buyer to click on it. If I can feel that out, and I'm not going to pry unnecessarily, but if in conversation that comes out that they're not a grader, and I get cards from them and they're in great condition, that's a really good combination, because I am looking to grade cards eventually. But the advantage to buying raw, I probably don't have to tell this to anybody, is you get them at about 10% of what you'd pay graded. So then I get to make the choice. As that player develops, I may grade it, because if I bought graded, I might regret that. I'd rather have the option.
3 strikes and you're out for some of these eBay, or is it 1 strike and you're out? Because I'm just wondering if you have this much experience of seeing patterns and responses, or is it some other metaphor besides baseball?
When it comes to me assessing, I'm not going to say judging, especially not on a moral front, because they have a right to sell however they want to, but it's not judging if I feel them out and I make a personal decision that I don't want to buy from them. I haven't judged them in a moral way. Is it 1 strike? It's probably 1 strike. You know what I mean? If I get done wrong, for instance, if I ask a seller about surface condition and he says, this card is immaculate, I have looked at it and it's clean, I can't find anything wrong with it. If I receive that card and it has multiple chrome dents and surface scratches that are readily visible, I'm not talking about under a jeweler's loupe, I'm talking about readily visible, just look at it under a light in your office. If that stuff is readily visible, then I'm not upset with that seller for making some moral decision that went against our transaction in a negative way. He may not be competent in his ability to review a raw card. So probably that's strike 1, and that's the equivalent of strike 3 for me. I won't go back to that seller. There's plenty of sellers to buy from. There would be no need for me to go back to them.
This isn't a flaw in what you're doing, but it adds a wrinkle to it, and that is that most people can't grade. And most people are unable to see the flaws. And it's a human condition. Maybe not all, but many people have difficulty seeing flaws in their own cards. They don't have difficulty seeing flaws in somebody else's cards. They have difficulty seeing the flaws in their own cards. Consciously asking them to take a second look. If I'm going to buy this, I'd like to know, could you answer this specific question for me? And I guess if they don't answer, you have your answer. If they don't answer, if
Correct.
they do answer superficially, what you're saying, Kirt, is you're living up to your name, which you should. And yet you're not trying to destroy somebody. You're trying to protect your own interests.
That's correct. To assume it's a second look is actually making an assumption that they've made a first look. A lot of raw sellers are busting packs, and they'll claim the common phrase "pack fresh." And so, if they've never really taken a look at it, that's where my question comes into play. This may be a first look, might be the first time they've ever looked for service condition issues. So, it's just a feel out of where the seller's at and how much he knows about that card.
Do you think you're in the 20% of the people that ask those further questions? Because I think a lot of the transactions on eBay are just automatic. Somebody sees it, they look at it. They're not that condition sensitive. They may or may not be thinking about eventually grading it, but they're not as particular or as brutally honest as you are. So are some of these sellers taken aback that you would even ask the questions? Are they looking for a hands-free, simple transaction without any question? What do you get on that?
I think you ask a good question on the percentage. Am I in the 20%? I think that's a pretty good number. I might reduce it a little bit from my experience. If I think of 100 raw transactions, how many times did I get pushback or just ignored or anything like that? Which again, not judging them, that's their right. I would say 15, I'm probably in the 15%.
Yeah.
I'd say 85% of the buyers and sellers on eBay, especially if you look at just the seller side, they would rather just have a turnkey sale, boom, it's done, it's out of my inventory. Please don't ask me any questions. I find that annoying. That's very nuanced. What is the price of the card? If it's a 99-cent, I'm not going to ask them questions about condition. You know what I'm saying? And if it's a numbered card, like for instance, right now I'm interested in Francisco Lindor first Mets cards, his Topps Chrome update card. It's a nice looking card. In the NBA, they're talking about LeBron's first Laker card, like his Laker rookie card. And I don't know how much people are looking at that in baseball yet. So I'm finding that I can get Francisco Lindor first Mets Chrome cards for really cheap if they're raw. And I'm not crying a lot about condition because they're numbered. If it looks really good in the picture, I'm okay with that. I might fire out a question, but I'm not going to press the issue. I'm happy to have a Lindor blue team color refractor out of 199. That's wonderful, even if it's an 8.
Well, we're looking at it from your perspective. If we flip it around, your strategy suggests that you should be asking these questions because it's your intention. You have a side gig that requires you to have a sharp eye and know what to send in and what not, and to know how long to hold. And I admire that. That's fine. But there are people, just like you don't want to buy from. I know that there's eBay sellers that when they get a question like that, they write you off.
That's fine.
And there's no judgment there. It's just there are people in our industry that will fire their customers. And it's true of many industries. It's a hobby instead of an industry, but still, you know what I'm saying.
I know. I fire customers. I do IT work on site.
Okay. You don't make any profit if there's a lot of friction and back and forth.